The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the fourth Labour government. A podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
Most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the fourth Labour government. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on The Spin-off or wherever you get your podcasts.
No mai hoki mai ki other fold e mihi ne ko Duncan Greive tōku ingoa. My guest today will be familiar to you. I last spoke to him a few weeks ago. It's Toby Manhire, the man of the hour, I reckon. Fresh off the release of Juggernaut, our brand new 6-part podcast exploring the fourth Labour government, this kind of electric, tumultuous, sort of chaotic, brilliant, choose your own adjectives, choose your own adventure through this one, government that really feels like the starting gun on modern New Zealand. Toby has spent the last sort of 6 months just absolutely devouring this subject. He's read a vast number of books, probably pretty much everything ever written about it. Listened to a huge amount of contemporary audio from the time, watched a whole lot of video that's available, and spent a huge amount of time interviewing different participants in it to create this beautiful textured narrative podcast that covers those 6 years, which really were the sort of birth of modern New Zealand, for better and worse, according to different perspectives on it. I worked as an EP on the project along with Jane Yee, who's recording this. Thank you, Jane. And I think it was a real privilege to watch this small team do their thing. Tiahe Butler, who is having a well-earned day off today, and Sophie Dowson, the producer. It was just just a passion project that was all-consuming, and I think that is evident in the product. So I thought I'd get Toby on to talk about the podcast and what he learned along the way and what it did to him. If you want to check out Juggernaut, there is a link to the feed in the show notes. But then also, while he was here, talk about the last 6 weeks in media, how Goldsmith's tracking, where the sort of the stars from Newshub have landed and what that might mean, a look into the sort of glimpses that you're getting of what stuff's new 3 News bulletin will look like. And then inexplicably, really, we talk a bit about French politics at the end, so stick around for that. This is Toby Manhire, my very good friend and colleague, talking about Juggernaut on the Fold. What in it, Toby? Toby's just looking at his phone doing text right now. This is good. This is the kind of rapt attention I command from my colleagues.
I'm texting Ben Thomas. Sorry.
What's Ben Thomas saying?
I don't know. He thinks that we should do a podcast on the fifth national government. I love this guy taking requests now.
Is that the John Key one? Yeah. No, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, we're not talking. Anyway, you can stop texting Ben.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's fine. I wanted to ask how you're feeling right now, but I sort of feel like I know the answer and it's distracted. And But
I'm running on fumes.
You are, yeah. You're jangled. It's just been such a mess. Like, you've looked pretty fried a lot of the time while doing this, and I have had cause to feel bad.
I've been looking fried for years.
My role in it. But what about right now? It's out. It's done. It's signed, sealed,
It's
delivered.
a weird time, isn't it, when you work on a project for a long time and then you are in that sort of nether zone, the liminal zone between sort of working on it. And I'm still doing some writing for the site, but the podcast is I'm very happy to say that so far, and there's plenty of time in which this could change, it's been pretty well received, the podcast. So that makes me feel a bit less fried.
Is there anything that sort of has gnawed at you a bit in terms of, like, as I know when we talked about during the making of it, and you were sort of like, it must have new information, it must work for people who were there, and sometimes I felt like you were setting yourself this impossibly high bar, but I think you have pulled it off. And the thing that I like most about it, and will remain to be seen, but I can imagine that any political party from then or now won't feel misrepresented by it, which I think, given the tendency towards thesis with this government, is quite a hard thing to do.
Well, I hope that's right. I mean, I didn't go into it, as you know, with any intention of providing an essay or a commentary or, certainly wanted to avoid anything that was remotely didactic. There are plenty of books out there where people have written excellent commentaries from one side or another. What I wanted to do fundamentally was tell the story, and you're right that one of the tensions that I had hovering around the whole time was I want to be able to tell a story that has been told many times before and people have experienced much more directly than me, including just people who were older than me at the time. I was a kid. But I also want to make the story accessible to a younger audience. By younger, I mean under the age of 45, probably. And in the end, that second audience is more important. So no disrespect to the others, and hopefully I won't upset that group. And so far, it doesn't seem so. And there is new stuff in there. There are new perspectives. There are new anecdotes, There are new bits and pieces. But yeah, I sort of settled fundamentally on the ambition of this podcast needs to be able to tell this story using a format that's relatively new to an audience that's unfamiliar with it.
It's interesting, right? Like you were just texting with Ben, who was pitching what the second season should be, which does feel a little premature. But why this government for the first season? To be clear, there is no second season. But what was it about this moment, that kind of felt like it deserved something of this scale?
It just looms so large across New Zealand politics. You can draw direct lines, some of them more wobbly lines, between so many things that happened then and contemporary New Zealand and politics and culture and society, the works. It was a kind of foundational moment. It was weird. It was paradoxical, and it stays with the different parties in different ways. It's Muldoon is someone that doesn't get mentioned in the big speeches by national leaders when you do the roll call of the great leaders. Douglas is very much persona non grata for the Labour lot, and they've got more to tackle with. And then all of that, et cetera, also, man, what a story. So many different stories, as hopefully we have laid out in the course of the podcast episode. Amazing characters. There are different parts of, talk about sequels, and I'm not pitching one, but there are a whole lot of different parts of the story that you could extrapolate out into 6-part podcasts in their own right. And people have written books about all sorts of different elements in it. Even if you take away the most compelling part of the story, which is the economic transformation, there's still a ton of stories. Even if you take out the nuclear bit, there's still a ton of stories. That's just so fertile. So I guess, so such a many-sided dice. Dice. Die. I think it's die. Isn't this singular die?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, just take that bit out or just make it sound like I agreed with him.
It's absolutely, play it again, but slower.
That's right. It's die, the singular.
Maybe.
So it's interesting, right, because as you say, the Fourth Labour government, everyone in current politics can define themselves in some way by their relationship to it, and a lot of people, particularly people of a certain age, will approach this with a very strong idea of how they feel about it. And I assume that you had a decent idea of it in your head before you even started reading a pile of books that's probably taller than you, just to sort of get into it. When you got in there, was there anything that you discovered that surprised you, or whether it contradicted a thesis, or it kind of unlocked the complexity of it that isn't there in some of those simple narratives that get tossed around?
I mean, loads of stuff across the board, and some of which, if I'm honest, was in early drafts and then didn't make it into. There is a problem you face in telling any story where you want to capture the nuance, and hopefully we did up to a large extent. But also, you don't want to like coast into caricature, but at the same time, there are certain storylines that are compelling. The thing that, I just mentioned this, but one of the real discoveries was the parts of the story that I think are less often foregrounded, and that is, for example, the homosexual law reform bill, which we give over a proper chunk of an episode to, the majority of one episode to, which in various biographies and autobiographies of the time barely rates a footnote. There's one biography of a leading figure of the time in which the homosexual law reform bill is mentioned once in reference to it being annoying in the Timaru by-election, and then all of the stuff in terms of the relationship between the state and Te Ao Māori, I think is fascinating, and hopefully we've been able to surface that more than there sometimes has been, which you can track through from Hui Taumata to the extension of the Waitangi Tribunal's remit back to 1840 through to the Waitangi Treaty Principles, which of course are a point of much contention today. So it's that sort of stuff around it that I kind of learned the most about, I guess.
In terms of motion shock or the amount of policy shift and just how ambitious, audacious some of that policy was, that's a big part of why this government is so fascinating. Because a lot of your work was to kind of dig into the contemporaneous reporting and archives. Were people aware at the time, do you think, of how momentous, how lasting what was happening was, or has that kind of become clearer in hindsight?
I think so. I think to a certain extent they knew that they were living in some wild times. Richard Harman is on the podcast and is fascinating to listen to, and is so...
He was the political editor for TVNZ at the time, is that right?
Or was he political editor for Eyewitness News, perhaps? But yes, he was a TVNZ senior political journalist, and he is responsible for what I think may be the most captivating bit of broadcasting on New Zealand politics in our history, which is the dual interviews that were aired on our Eyewitness News on the night of Monday, July the 16th, when Muldoon was clinging on, sitting out there at Vogel House in between bits of watching Hill Street Blues. And then that video is played to Longy, and he gives that incredible response, goes up a gear. So Harman, when he talks about that time, he knew. They knew. I think it was kind of probably the extent to which every astonishment was followed by an almost bigger astonishment, which is the nature about that almost. Story. I think I'm at once envious of the journalists who were there to watch and, cover that story. And also, I think Harman put it in a better way than I will, but he said there is a bit of, once you've done that, what else is there? It's kind of, those are once in a lifetime episodes in history.
I mean, that's interesting, right? Because I've been thinking about it, like, as someone who, by the nature of the spin-off and of your job, you're kind of writing analysis and commentary on every beat of politics. And we've had obviously some extraordinary times in the, in the not yet quite yet 10 years the spin-off's been around in terms of, shock resignations and COVID and all manner of different things, and yet still they feel somewhat small by comparison to the 80s. How did you find switching modes from that kind of beat-by-beat chronicling of politics to taking something that had a much greater ambition, sweep that feels like, this, in terms of a thing that you've made that will endure, this has to be sort of up there in some respects because of its intense focus on this absolutely pivotal moment?
I mean, I found it challenging personally and professionally, and it was a real shift in the sort of through the gears in terms of how you research, how you collaborate, and then how you ultimately, write and realise with a small team. Sophie as producer and Ti here as sound designer and editor, and you and Jane as EPs. And we hadn't done it before, This is a new thing. And we worked very hard on it, but it's a different way of looking at things. And quite, I suppose, in a way, refreshing to be able to look at something in the whole, to look at something on a different timescale, to get away from the ephemeral nature of knocking out a piece of analysis of a day.
Well, I think it's very much the opposite of that, and it was honestly like a massive privilege to work on it as EP and to kind of hear the rough and then the finished version of these episodes.
And I should say that was possible because of New Zealand On Air providing some funding for it, as well as spin-off members who make this whole ship remain afloat.
That's very true, and that the fact of those two kind of forces allowing for something like this to be made, which that does feel like it goes right to the core of who we are as a people and how we were made. We're very grateful to both those parties.
Are you curious about how business can be better? I'm Simon Pound, and I host Business is Boring, a podcast where I kōrero with some of the most interesting people in entrepreneurship, commerce, and making things happen. Tune in to Business is Boring every Tuesday, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with Spark Business Lab.
Talofa lover, I'm Madeline Chapman, editor at The Spin-Off. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spin-Off member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
We'll switch gears now. I'm very excited to kind of to see how it lands. We record this. It's been out for about just shy of sort of 6 or 7 hours. Please, if you haven't listened to it, just go do it. You will not regret it. I just want to talk now that while I have you here, we did a podcast about maybe 6 weeks ago after the shock firing of Melissa Lee. I was somewhat worse for wear in a hotel room in Malaysia, and you kindly jumped on to kind of respond to that, and I had some very good feedback on it. I just wondered now, we're about 6 weeks in. Goldsmith has a number of portfolios, but now is broadcasting. I just wondered if you could give a bit of an assessment of how you think he's tracking vis-a-vis that portfolio. We both saw him speak at the Voyages, which is naturally going to be if not a hostile, but certainly a sceptical environment for him. Yeah, what's your take on it so far?
I mean, he seems much more at ease than Melissa Lee did, and I don't know in great detail his politics. I think there is a libertarian streak in there, but I also think he has that sort of slightly the kind of almost Carlylean conservative thing where I think you sense that he understands the role of the Fourth Estate, that he understands the role of arts and culture, because he's now got this suite of portfolios that span arts, culture, media, right? There was snafu, wasn't there, with the way that the Fair Digital Bargaining Bill, or whatever one version of the order of those words it's called, in the way that came out of the Select Committee, and they messed that up. So that's whether that's Goldsmith's responsibility or not, I don't know, but it doesn't necessarily give you a lot of confidence that they're really on top of it. So in terms of the actual substance of it, I don't know. But there's I think broadly speaking, at least he's out there fronting up. He seems reasonably assured in the territory. I mean, I think there are murmurings which you've written about that the project that he's exploring is a merger of New Zealand On Air and the New Zealand Film Commission, and from as far as I can see, that makes sense across a range of tick boxes. Insofar as it would be good, it would be national owning a reform. It would be fiscally neutral, and I think the industry would broadly, if not universally, support it. It would modelled on the Australian version, remembering, of course, that Ruth Harley was the first head of Screen Australia, an entity which approached film and television together as a funding body, and she is currently
outgoing chair
NZ On Air. So, I mean, this is not that's not based on any intel. I'm just saying some things, and so that seems like a doing of a thing that could be productive.
Yeah, agree. I mean, my sort of. I was speaking to an executive yesterday who's met with him. I haven't, and the spin-off hasn't, though apparently he did try and come and visit us. And
did he not say, did you tell me that he had, he said he was walking past the spin-off building?
I hope I'm not revealing something kind of out of school here, but yeah, he told me that he was walking past the spin-off, realised where he was and wanted to come through. And it's a very unfortunate thing where the doors to come through from the New North Road side are kind of permanently locked because people were stealing courier packages. So if you want to get round, you have to kind of schlep about, and you tend to have to be told how to get through, or call someone and have them let you in. And so there's this kind of faintly comic image of the broadcasting minister.
It is a very New Zealand image, isn't it?
So
it's just like
New
people going, hello.
Yeah, you can imagine just have you made it in? Yeah. It would have been, there have been a few moments like that at the spin-off where someone interesting or odd has sort of stumbled into but that would have been right up there. But this exec who had met with him said that they'd met with, I think, about 5 or 6 broadcasting ministers over the last few years, and they said that they thought he was the most able, engaged, interested. Willie had a lot going for him. I think it was sort of underrated, but the grasp of the minutiae of the portfolio was sometimes elusive. It would come and go in terms of his articulation. Was Goldsmith does seem to have his handle already on the specific challenges of the media. So we shall see.
And, the other thing maybe we said this last time, but the other thing for the media is that he is a member of the kitchen cabinet, I'm pretty sure now, so he has the air of the leadership, and he's been around the houses, he's been through some things. When you've been in the headlines for messing up, taking ownership for a mess up in a manifesto economic policy, and all of the horrors of that happened ahead of the 2020 election, then you're unafraid of what can go on in a portfolio like this, I think.
Yeah, well, it gives you a bit of perspective, right? I mean, media must be it's a bit of a poison chalice in that it's economically challenged, it's very noisy, and if you do everything right, they'll probably still be unhappy. So, it's not great, but you do want someone who at least believes in the function of it. Speaking of, we published last week an interview that I did with David Seymour on this topic, and he's a crucial piece in this, as one of the 3 parties of the coalition. And while he's not the minister of it per se, he, obviously will be the decider of whatever reforms go through, assuming that they I mean, there is a weird thing with the Fair Digital News bargaining bill that has been pointed out that, they because New Zealand First is in favour of it and all the parties of opposition, they could theoretically, there's paths to it passing without ACT and without plausibly even national. I don't even know how that would work given.
I don't know if you could do it without national.
They certainly have the numbers to do it, but I'm not sure how that would function.
But yes, you would have thought that before it got to that point, there would be some accommodation reached because it wouldn't look great.
It would look awful.
Maybe it's fine. Maybe it's grown up. It's the kind of thing you could imagine someone saying that happens in Denmark all the time. I don't know. I don't know if it does or doesn't. Maybe it should be fine for that to happen, to have different configurations. But in terms of the way that we operate with the cabinet system, that would be a problem.
It would be a hard sell. So anyway, that's why I sought him out, and I thought I quite enjoyed the conversation that there was this kind of more reflective quality than some of what ACT can bark out in some of its different communications apparatuses, and it is this sort of frustrating thing where you kind of everyone is incentivized when they're in social media or at a stand-up or something to kind of give a more hyperbolic version than maybe they naturally believe. And what I was trying to get to with him was, well, like in a context where that would be an embarrassing thing to do, what do you sort of really think? And whether that might actually sort of de-escalate some of because they can feel like there's quite a lot of animus between some politicians and the media at the moment. Do you think that it is elevated, or is it just, largely...
I think it has been a bit. I mean, I think that has come and gone over time. But yeah, no, I do think it's fair to say that there has been some tension there. And I haven't been around about the press gallery, so I can't really speak to that. And I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody else, just as a sort of observer, really. Yeah, it does seem kind of tense. It's an interesting contradiction, isn't it? Because for someone like Seymour, it's both... The media keep on jumping on these trivial elements and promoting them, but then also they're throwing out bits of morsels that they know are there to try and attract media attention. There is a certain amount of, the line that a politician complaining about the media is like a sailor complaining about the sea. You just got to get on with it. I mean, I always enjoy talking to David Seymour. I always think he is up for engaging in a debate. I also was very unimpressed by the things he said about Benedict Collins, especially when things were going off there, when there was a sense of a certain amount of Schadenfreude over what was happening at TVNZ, and I think he's better than that.
No, I agree. I mean, it's interesting, right? Like you sort of touched on it there. We were talking about it a bit off air that there's a weird thing now where as we move out of a period of hierarchically controlled editorial spaces with 6 p.m. news, where there is or the front page of a newspaper or a radio bulletin, for example, into ones where the algorithm decides what's there. I think everyone, whether they know it or not, and sometimes I think they know it less than they think, they're subconsciously adjusting the content they create to meet with the imagined approval of the algorithm. You only ever find out when it goes live. But so you have, and that obviously impacts media, impacts story selection. There might be something that we're passionate about that is really important that we've published 10 stories on, no one's read them. It's very hard to keep doing that, no matter what the sort of public interest, in another sense of the word.
I think that's absolutely right. I go along with that completely. I think that one of the differences, and Seymour pointed this out in that interview with you, is time. The resource of time is the really scarce resource. There's lots of scarce resources in media, heaps of them. Time, the collective time of journalists doing journalism, is the one that is really in peril. And that time affords you possibilities like saying, this is a story that's important to us. It's not very obviously hooky or sexy, but we're going to find a way to show people why it's important. And those are some of, in my time in journalism, those are some of the most interesting, rewarding conversations around a desk or whatever is like, this matters. How are we going to make this not clickbaity and not salacious, but really tease out what's interesting and bring people into it. And that stuff, which is an editorial process thing rather than a time spent on a thing, that takes time.
Yeah, well, you're so right, and it really does, particularly with those kind of important but hard to kind of shake people out of their sort of torpor on type stories. And you're right, like, because it's so satisfying when you can go, actually, this image, Toby Morris was brilliant, former spin-off cartoonist, at figuring out a visual way to kind of crack at that, whether it was a metaphor or some other communication, or like it's a sort of a headline framing device that just kind of snaps your neck back and makes you look again, and that sort of last mile type stuff, the story is underneath. Often the story actually has to meet the what is being sold in the headline and the image, obviously. But it can be that sweating there can produce supernormal results. But it is when you're just making these kind of brutal calculuses around time, it's the thing that looks like it can be cut and cut and cut.
It's true. Like, if your metrics that you plug into your calculator to work out the value of doing a thing, what you're basing it on, then it's crazy. The economy of it is crazy. Of course, you wouldn't spend time doing that, but over time, that becomes kind of deleterious across the board.
It really does. So I just want to hit on a couple of other topics before we go. This is your third interview of the day, so I'm very grateful for you. I mean, it's not quite a megapod. I mean, everything must be kind of routine.
That's right enough. So you've done the megapod, yeah. But it's good to be on the what do you call it when you on a press it's a press junket if you're the media person. What if you're the other person? What do you call that?
I think it's a press junket.
Okay, I'm doing that.
Yeah. There's been a bit of a post-Newshub recruiting scramble that started to come into view in recent weeks. The sort of big stars have largely landed at various locations. NZME got Ryan Bridge and Michael Moore. Stuff has probably got the biggest haul of all with Samantha Hayes and most recently Lloyd Burr. Mike McRoberts went to the NBR, probably.
So did Simon Shepherd.
Yep, but maybe some of the less expected stuff. What's your kind of sense of how that stuff is sort of playing out, if you'll pardon the pun?
I'm very happy that some of those people have found new roles. I have no idea whether the people that aren't necessarily household names, whether that's because they're less senior journalists or because they're people who work on the shop floor, whether it's in editing or cameras. I don't know how they're going, and so I really feel for those people. It's interesting to see and hear little tidbits coming out of staff towers. I really hope that works. I don't think anyone knows whether it will or not. We were watching, there was a Tova O'Brien track she had the other day.
That was such a clear, I really enjoyed that. So this was about her, she broke a story about sort of troubles in the ACT election campaign, and you sort of, and it was a written story, but at the top of it was something that, as you said, was very much like what a 2.5 minute version of it would look like on a 6 p.m. news show.
It was a piece to camera without quite as many frills, but really good. I mean, it's great to see Tova O'Brien there. I mean, I think it's not necessarily the journey that she would have expected when she left Newshub. I think the idea of her, a future version of her appearing on the 6 p.m. bulletin on 3 would have been unthinkable. But it's the universe is a crazy game, and so I think that's exciting. Jenna Lynch they have, which is Jenna is a terrific journalist. Lloyd Burr you mentioned, and I mean I'm. Amelia Wade, which again, a real kind of pro, and there are others who I can't remember, but I'm thinking of you. The around those, you need sort of, I would have thought, obviously Sam Hayes, but you need sort of, if you can get hopefully like 10 people who are just hit the ground running while they're trying to train up the other people. I still think it's going to be hard, you know? Like I think, for example, from quite routinely, the Prime Minister will pop up of a day in Queenstown. Queenstown's an important part of the New Zealand economy, and will give a press conference. Very often that press conference, take for example the one where Christopher Luxon stood firmly that he was going to keep his taxpayer subsidised flat, and then within 20 minutes he had very firmly changed his mind. That stand-up was in Queenstown, if I recall correctly. I think I'm right. So if you're the 6 p.m. news on 3, you need someone there. Flying someone to Queenstown at short notice is not cheap. Those are the kind of one of the things that are why TV is so expensive. So as I understand it, instead they will get someone from whether it's the Queenstown office or maybe someone goes from Dunedin or Wood to cover that. If that person has also got an editor from their local website, newspaper, whatever, going, where's that story you were doing for me about the council debate around that subdivision or whatever, and they also have to be there with filming in some way, the stand up and asking I don't know. Those things can put a real strain, and I'm sure that they will have thought about this in much more detail than I have, and probably, hopefully, they have a solution for that. But those are the sorts of things that I think will be the test, as much as the talent, and there are different ways you can work around presenting it differently. Of course, they can't try and attempt to present it the same as Newshub, but it's the thing that I worry a bit about is the pressure it will place on the existing print workforce in what is New Zealand's biggest newsroom.
Yeah, it's really fascinating that there's, you know, I think about this too much for sure, and find myself changing my mind every day or with every fresh conversation I have about it. There's the current thing that I'm sort of wondering about, and I wondered about in relation to Tova's Act story was if you've got the most journalists, theoretically you're breaking the most stories. And some of those stories, which are currently broken and run on, whether it's the Post or on Stuff or some other masthead, would have 6 p.m. salience, but they just don't have the material, so they just don't go to TV. And if you have a higher volume of original, nowhere else reporting, even if you don't have perfect vision for it, you should have a much more differentiated product from the TVNZ version, which was, you know, those two tended to kind of mirror each other in some ways with politics at their core. But there's a world where you're selecting from a larger and deeper well of stories, and you just have to figure out a different way to tell them. And that's so maybe a worse-looking product that is made by different people that is a bit scrappier might nonetheless be more compelling in another way that could keep eyes on it.
Maybe having more stories, you know, maybe go full back to Philip Sherry and Angela Dordney, where they used to quite often read out whole stories.
Yeah,
I think I'm right on the news, and that would be it. They wouldn't cut to a track, or they wouldn't do anything else because it was just telling you the.
Well, you could
story.
just read over some visuals.
So they could just be scrolling through stuff and just go, oh, this looks an interesting one.
Double click here.
Yeah, how about that? Oh, how about that? You know.
So if you're listening, that's copyright Toby Manhire. That fantastic idea. I was going to ask you about France and the UK, which is
about France.
Quite ridiculous. I won't do that. I've taken enough of your time. I am really curious about these two snap elections. They're both in tribute to our snap election of 1984.
Yeah,
very kind of them.
Yeah.
And how much they look like they're doing it for content. Like everything is content now, even down to like.
Well, I think the unifying factor between Macron and Sunak's snap elections is sheer desperation, isn't it? So the element of surprise is all you have.
Well, you're sort of gaming out. I mean, in Macron's, I kind of obviously have put a bit more. I think Macron is leading a more respectable party or government than Sunak, for better or worse. But I think the way I sort of understand it is that he's done it not because he has to, but because he thinks, and there is this Gaelic thing of, you know, they love to protest and signal things, and it's like, well, do you really mean that? Because if you really mean that, here's your chance.
Yeah.
And I kind of admire the sort of verve of it. It'll be if it could go very badly wrong.
It's a verve born of desperation, though, isn't it? Or maybe impetuousness.
Hard to know.
But I'd love to come back and discuss French politics with you.
This is a new segment on the fold.
Le Fold.
Thank you so much for coming on the Le Fold.
De rien.
A bientôt, Toby.
Au revoir.
What a ridiculous podcast.
Kia ora, this is Toby Manhire, here to urge you to tune in to Gone by Lunchtime, a podcast with me, Annabelle Lee Mather and Ben Thomas, tackling the world of New Zealand politics, from policy to polling, from scandal to psychodrama. Listen to Gone by Lunchtime, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network, wherever good pods are sold.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spin-Off. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spin-Off member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.